Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Friday, September 25th, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well, best we can. These are crazy, crazy times. We're dealing with coronavirus, and we're dealing with a madman in the White House who's getting worse day by day. But I wanted to talk about this this study. I posted this article on Thursday, September 24th. And it's a new study that came out from Citigroup Bank. And it documents how racism has cost the U.S. economy $16 trillion, okay, in lost revenue, all right? And it ties right into the history and conditions of African Americans. And also, it should serve as a wake-up call for people who want to deny racism exists, deny systemic racism, people like Donald Trump. And some of his supporters, things like this, okay? So everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. We're broadcasting on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, I-M-H-O-T-E-P, I-M-H-O-T-E-P on YouTube. Follow me on Facebook and YouTube. Turn on notifications so you know when we go live also. All right. Then African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. We have a few ad slots left. Current promotion: buy 1 month, get 2 months free. All right, so let's jump into this here. So I saw an article from CBSNews.com. I monitor about 35 different news sources on a daily basis. Even when I'm on the road, I do a lot of reading. If you look at the articles that I post on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, you see they come from a variety of news sources. So I read articles from CBSNews.com, also Black Enterprise, and then also a good article from National Public Radio, NPR.org, dealing with this study. Well, if we look at the article from CBSNews.com, this is racism has cost the U.S. 16 trillion Citigroup fines, okay? And this is over the last 20 years. This isn't the last 200 years. This isn't since slavery ended. This is the last 20 years. So America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between African Americans and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. Okay, we're looking at inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment. Now, all this ties into policies, laws, okay, regulation, government. All this ties into this. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. This is what politics is. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. When we deal with racism, contrary to popular belief, and now politics impacts every aspect of our life, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. And those who are all into economic empowerment, I'm all for that. My degrees in business administration with a major in marketing. I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years, managed a business consulting company for 7 years, helped people start businesses, helped people get funding for business. I managed African American owned businesses where we had contracts with the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, and the state of Michigan. So I'm very familiar with city, county, and state government, getting contracts, keeping contracts. I'm familiar with the certification process, becoming a vendor for the state of Michigan, all of that stuff. Okay? So I understand how government shapes the economy that your business operates within. All right? And all we have to do is look at what happened with Donald Trump mishandling the coronavirus pandemic, which then tanked the economy. Second quarter of 2020, the GDP, gross domestic product, dropped 32.9%, which is a record drop. It's never dropped that much in history. We saw earlier this year that the economy ended 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth. 10 years of private sector job growth, which started under President Obama, and most of it was under President Obama, ended with this unstable genius. So I'm very familiar with how laws and policies and government shapes the economy that your African American owned business operates within, or that the businesses that we work for, the corporations that we work for, are impacted by the government. That's external. Okay, when you deal with a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which was a chart created by the Boston Consulting Group. This, when you study marketing, you study this. A SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses are things that are internal to your organization. Opportunities and threats are factors external to your organization. The economy is one of those things that's external to your organization. All right, that's just a little background in business and marketing, etc. All right, so when we look at this study, everybody share this broadcast. This is a different type of conversation and things you'll see a lot of other places. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between African Americans and white Americans. Okay, so all this deals with policies. All this deals with regulations, government, etc. Banking regulations, redlining, things like this. So the study released this week by Citigroup. This article came out September 23rd, 2020 from CBSnews.com. The study released this week by Citigroup Bank, is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. This study seeks to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. What is racism? Okay, I watch MSNBC. MSNBC is on right now. It's just muted. I watch MSNBC all day when I'm out on the road. I'm listening to MSNBC through the TuneIn radio app, or I may listen to the Black Information Network on 11:30 a.m. here in Detroit. I may listen to 9:10 a.m. Superstation because my radio show's on 9:10, so I guess I should listen to them. But oftentimes when, and especially recently, when we look at in the news and they talk about racism, they talk about Donald Trump, they talk about policies, they talk about the Breonna Taylor case, they talk about police misconduct targeting African Americans, things like this, and they talk about racism. Usually they don't define from a historical perspective what racism is. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets, calling people racial slurs, things like that. That's bigotry. That's not racism. Racism is a power structure. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, privileges, benefits, land, access to education, access to opportunity. They control the laws, they control the government, they control the healthcare system, corporations, media, etc. This is racism. When they control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. This is what racism is. That don't have nothing to do with calling people racial epithets. That has nothing to do with not liking people. Okay? So we have to understand this. In the concept, in the power structure, racism comes out of the ideology of white supremacy. White supremacy is an ideology that European culture, European phenotypes, European ways of doing things is superior to other people. Okay? And this is an ideology that develops coming out of the Dark Ages, going into the Renaissance period. coming out of the 1400s going into the 1500s, when Europeans start conquering people's land, and you have Columbus, 1492, August 3rd, 1492, and landing in the Bahamas, October 12th, 1492. When you have Europeans coming out of the Dark Ages, Portugal, Spain, other European nations, and they're circumnavigating the globe, and they're conquering people's lands, and they're extracting wealth from people's lands, enslaving people, extracting the gold, extracting the silver, etc., and rebuilding Europe, because Europe had lost 1/3 to 1/4 of its people through the Black Death, the bubonic plague that hit in spurts from 1347 to 1400. The Black Death. Okay, Europe loses 1/4 to 1/3 of its population, from between 25 million to 75 million people. They had already been fighting the African Moors for hundreds of years. The African Moors are intermixing with the European population, changing the complexion of Europeans to various degrees, especially in Spain and Portugal, because they're going in from Morocco, in Spain and Portugal, or right above Morocco. When they go in originally in 711 AD, even though there were already Africans in Europe, when they go in 711 AD, it's called the Iberian Peninsula. It's not Spain and Portugal. They're going into Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Sicily, going to Crete. They go into all these areas, and they're intermixing with the European population and changing the complexion of Europeans. Spain and Portugal probably get it the most, and historically the Spanish and Portuguese had a darker complexion than the English, Austrian, than the English, those in Germany, those in Austria, because when you look at a map, England and Austria and Germany are farther away from Spain and Portugal, even though the Moors are there. The Moors are in France. Okay, so as Europe is coming out of the Dark Ages and gaining power, these European countries, they're rebuilding themselves. They're oppressing Africans. They're enslaving Africans, because these were the same African people they had been dealing with for hundreds of years, the Moors. They weren't coming in contact when the Portuguese go into Mauritania in 1441. And this is when we look at the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. Usually we started in 1441 with the Portuguese going into Mauritania. That ain't the first time they were dealing with Africans. They were dealing with them for hundreds of years. The Moors. So when what we're dealing with is the purpose of racism is to preserve genetic white survival. That's what this is all about. Racism is the power structure to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans to preserve genetic white survival. And the power structure of racism reinforces the ideology of white supremacy. The ideology of white supremacy is to preserve genetic white survival, because Europeans saw what happened for hundreds of years when Africans intermixed with Europeans. And as they started circumnavigating the globe, and they started seeing the majority of the world was not European, and when they started intermixing, when those men on those ships started intermixing with the native women, and saw that the baby wasn't white anymore in general, right? They realized over time, they had to put things in place. Otherwise, they would genetically become wiped off the face of the earth. So when we understand racism and white supremacy, they work together. They're not the same thing. Racism is the power structure. White supremacy is the ideology that gave birth to the power structure. But this is all about preserving genetic white survival. If you don't understand that, and you think racism is about calling people at the N-word, calling people racial epithets, not liking people, then you don't understand racism or white supremacy. Okay, now I encourage people to read these two books. It's a number of books to read. One, you can read this also, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. Browder's a brilliant brother, brilliant historian, archaeologist. He's a friend of mine. He's in Hidden Colors, and he's also in what's the Out of Darkness by director Amadeus Christ. Okay, now this right here, Golden Age of the Moor. Golden Age of the Moor. This is one of the best books dealing with the history of the Moors, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Okay, Runoko Rashidi, who's a friend of mine, has an essay in here. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, who's one of the baddest scholars on the history of the Moors. All of that. This deals with this. This deals with that whole history of the Moors, 800 plus years in Europe. All right. Now this one here, this is a book by Runoko Rashidi, Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. And this deals with, this is probably like kind of an updated version of Golden Age of the Moor. A lot of color pictures in here. But this deals with the history of these African Moors. You look at this picture right here, page 92. A Moor in chains, 17th century in Prague, Czechoslovakia. The Moors in Czechoslovakia. They're in Austria. They're in Germany. I mean, when we look at the name Schwarzenegger, Schwarz means dark or swarthy. Neger is Austrian and German for Negro. Okay, Schwarzenegger means, it can mean either the dark plowman or the dark Negro. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay broke this down in one of his lectures dealing with the history of the Moors in Spain. But the Moors are in Austria and Germany. Austria and Germany are right next to each other. So when we look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, Arnold Schwarzenegger was from where? Austria. The Moors are all throughout Austria. Saint Maurice. Saint Maurice was a Moor who became the patron saint to Germany. Okay? Saint Maurice, he was a Christian and he was martyred. Saint Maurice. But when you go study this, Alessandro de Medici. Alessandro de Medici. He was called Il Moro, I-L-M-O-R-O. He was the Duke of Florence, okay, ruler of Florence from 1530 to 1537. This is page 92. All right, so when you go now, this right here, I've dealt with this in some of my lectures. So we know the Black Madonna and Child. The Europeans are worshiping the Black Madonna and Child, which is a copy of Osset, Isis, and Heru, Horus, which then becomes transformed as the Black Madonna and Child. Okay, they're worshiping that even before the Moors go in. But you still have the statues of the Black Madonna and Child in Czechoslovakia and Poland and things like this. France, they still have those statues there. But this right here, this is the national flag of Sardinia. Okay, and it has 4 Moors' heads on it. The national flag of Sardinia, which is an Italian island. If you look at the national flags of Sardinia and Corsica, these islands, they have Moors' heads on their national flags. And because the Moors were in those areas, and the Moors were conquered, and it was a monumental effort to conquer them. So they're putting them on, these Europeans are putting them on those national flags. Originally, when you look at them here and you see they have a bandana, right? Originally, the bandana was a blindfold to signify that they were prisoners. But because of tourism and being politically correct, things like this, they turned the blindfold into a bandana. But the Moors were conquered. So when you study now this right here also, coat of arms of Pope Benedict XVI with the head of a Moorish king. All right, this right here, this is page 91 of Runoko Rashidi's book, Black Star, the African Presence of Early Europe. All right, so see, when you study books like this, now this is history before the transatlantic slave trade. So one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Kamene, talks about how to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. So we can't start the transatlantic slave trade in 15th century. You got to go back hundreds of years before that. To understand white supremacy and racism, you got to understand the history of the Moors in Europe. When they talk about the transatlantic slave trade, okay, the transatlantic slave trade is really Europeans getting revenge on the African Moors for what was happening in Europe for hundreds of years. The transatlantic slave trade is a continuation of these wars, of this conflict. It's a new chapter. Yes, it's a new chapter, but it's still a continuation of a story. See, the mistake that people make is they think that this was when 15th century, this is when Europeans first came in contact with African people. No, it's not. You missed the previous chapters of the story. Okay? So then you get into the stratification of humanity into races. You deal with people like Dr. Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, who coined the term Caucasian in 1779. You deal with people like Dr. Carl von Linnaeus, things like this. And these people are stratifying humanity into what we call races based upon geographical origins, based upon phenotype, hair texture, skin colors. And they're attaching characteristics. And many of these characteristics can be negative characteristics. They're attaching these characteristics and stereotypes to races, but not based upon anything scientific. So when you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and I don't know where the hell my copy of Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome is. I got five stacks of books in a bookcase behind me. I don't know where my copy of Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome is. But she deals with some of this history. Okay, the origins of races. The concept of race basically evolves over the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. All right, so when we deal with a study like this right here from Citigroup, and it's talking about racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion, okay, we really have to understand what it is that we're talking about and what racism is. All right, how's everybody doing? Share this, but this is a different type of conversation. All right, because I'm a different type of person. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Follow me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Okay, if you like this type of information, also you could donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. PayPal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. You can donate there. And all my DVD lectures and digital downloads are available there at our website. Articles I've written, things like that. And listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast here on social media, and we broadcast. I do radio here in Detroit, 10 a.m. The Superstation, WFDF. All those shows are archived on Facebook and YouTube, and in audio podcast format. So you go to my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on listen to podcasts, and we're on 8 different podcast platforms. Just search for the African History Network show wherever you get your podcast from. All right, because I have over 1,000 audio podcasts going back to 2010. Okay, so let's continue here. But I have to give you some of that historical foundation so we can understand this study. So we can understand what racism is in the origins of this. I have to give you that historical foundation. So the study released this week by Citigroup is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism, which basically is racism, because racism is systemic by nature, because racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Citigroup arrived at its $16 trillion figure after estimating that 1. African American workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. African American workers have lost $113 billion with a B billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades. We're just looking at 20 years, from 2000 to 2020. We ain't looking at that. We're not looking at 246 years of slavery. We're not looking at 400 years. We're just looking at 20 years, okay? Black workers, African American workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree, all right? So many of us are discriminated against, don't have the money to go to college, etc., may not have the grades to go, what have you. The housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African American applicants could not get home loans. So we're dealing with oftentimes redlining when it comes to getting home loans, not having collateral, not having enough credit, which deals with a lack of generational wealth, which is systemic. Okay, one of the things, if we look at, well, let's look at the next one. About $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed to the economy because black entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. About $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African American entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. So we just look at the personal protect of the pandemic protection program, the loans, the PPP loans, dealing with coronavirus and how a lot of African American owned businesses were excluded from that, discriminated from that, didn't have the proper relationships with the banks, etc. Things like this are generational.
Are you ready for a new black economy? Well, Happy, The Role of Economics in the Development of Civilization, is a brand new documentary that will set you on a new path of knowledge and enlightenment. The Happy film gives viewers a snapshot of our economic history from the dawn of civilization right up until today. The underlying theme of the film is the interrelationship between the three essential components of economics, politics, and culture. Happy brings together the brightest and most prolific minds in the fields of psychology, history, business, and politics, such as Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Dr. Julian Malveaux, Dr. Zahi Hawass, and Jabari Osazi, and more. Together, they deliver a message of cooperative economics, financial independence, and a pride that we can all be inspired by. The film is on sale now. It's streaming on all digital formats. Or for DVD, please visit Happy, H-A-P-I, happyfilm.com. Use offer code HAPPY, AHN, for a 10% discount. The revolution will not be televised. It will be digitized, coded, and branded. Don't let your young person get left behind. Join Tech Core 2 on Saturday, September 26, 2020 in their 6th straight year, providing tech, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, coding, and Saturday classes. Tech Core 2's mission is to develop a technology pipeline program for urban youth from kindergarten to college to career entry. Tech Core 2 offers 9 different tech classes for students in grades kindergarten through high school, including computer programming, coding, gaming, hip-hop and STEM, and video production. All classes are online with live instruction. To register or for more information, please visit techcore2.org. That's techcore, the number 2.org, or give them a call at 215-879-6701. That's 215-879-6701. Don't forget to grab your $10 discount with promo code TAHN Fall 2020.
Just to give you, even though this is outside of the 20-year period, just to give you some historical background information on this. When we look at policies that help to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources in this country, one of the biggest policies that did that came out of the New Deal. Now, even though there were some good things in the New Deal that benefited African Americans, a lot of the way the policies, a lot of the way the resources were put into the hands of various states set up discrimination against African Americans. Okay, so we look at the New Deal during World War II, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and we see that you're going to see the creation of the Social Security Administration in 1935. We see the Minimum Wage Act created in 1935. If you read this book here, How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy, this helps to break down in a concise book all those policies that help to maldistribute resources. But when we look at the GI Bill, the GI Bill is going to be government issue. The GI Bill is going to be one of the policies of the New Deal, and it was the last policy of the New Deal that is going to change the landscape of higher education in this country. And the 1.2 million or so African American veterans who fought in World War II, they're going to largely be shut out of the benefits of the GI Bill. The GI Bill is going to allow these white men who are veterans, is going to allow them to get low interest loans to go to college, to start businesses, and to buy homes. Low interest loans to go to college, start businesses, and buy homes. Okay? Oftentimes when we think about the GI Bill, we just think about going to college. It was three main things. African American soldiers, the veterans, are largely going to be discriminated against and taking advantage of these benefits that, one, they earned, two, their taxpayer dollars help subsidize and create opportunities for white men. So then, because of the Federal Housing Act of about 1949, the Federal Housing Act of 1949, which also allowed white people to put 3% down on low interest loans and get houses built out in the suburbs that are being formed after World War II. World War II ends in 1945. These men are coming back home, having children. This starts the baby boomer generation. Okay, now these men need more space to live in. They need to buy homes. They're having a family. The suburbs are being formed, and houses are being built out in the suburbs. Resources are being taken away from the inner city. The deindustrialization of the inner city starts, and factories and businesses are being moved out of the inner city into the newly formed suburbs. African Americans try to get loans to move out to the suburbs. We're running into the redlining. Redlining was created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation. The Homeowners Loan Corporation was a government entity created in 1933. Redlining is going to be created after that. Some sources say 1934, some sources say 1937. All right? So what happens is, with redlining, properties in areas of a city were shaded with different color shading. The properties that were looked at as good investments to make loans on, they were shaded in green. Properties that were looked at as bad investment, high risk, they were shaded in red. Well, a lot of the property in the inner city where many of us live was shaded in red. When we try to go get loans out in the newly formed suburbs, we're discriminated against. We're blocked from getting those loans. When these white men and white families are allowed to buy these homes in the newly formed suburbs, the homes are allowed to accumulate wealth, accumulate in value, so they accumulate wealth. Okay? And then you have the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 that drive about 41,000 miles of interstate highway all across the U.S., and they run through many of our communities. They ran through Black Bottom and Paradise Valley right here in Detroit, wiped out about 300 businesses, displaced hundreds of African Americans, maybe thousands, displaced homes, etc. We're going to see this take place all across the country. The expressways are running from the downtown district in the inner city out to the suburbs. Okay? And then you have the factories and businesses being moved out of the inner city into the suburbs. And then we're being locked, we're being trapped in the inner cities. Then this is when you see African Americans becoming mayors of these cities now, because white flight has already started. A declining in tax base has started, like in Detroit. Detroit had this, so a lot of people are under the misconception that white people started leaving Detroit when Mayor Coleman Young became mayor January 1974. No, white people were leaving going back to the early 60s, okay, even before then. Detroit had in 1961, Detroit had its first budget deficit. It had like a $16 million budget deficit, something like that. The Detroit Rebellion hits in 67. White people are leaving before then. Okay, you had like about 300,000 people, white people, who already left Detroit by 67. Okay, so a lot of people blame that on Mayor Young. Now, white people kept leaving when Mayor Young became mayor, but you know, it's a myth in Detroit. Mayor Young ran the white people out of Detroit. No, they were already leaving before he even became mayor. They were already leaving. All right, but what happens is because of white flight and African Americans being trapped, quote unquote, trapped in the inner cities, so to speak. Then African Americans become mayors and get on city council, things like this, right? And then a lot of those African American mayors, then they get blamed for the conditions that they inherited. Now, some of them made mistakes, etc. You know, but there was a good article from Marilyn Katz, K-A-T-Z. Marilyn Katz wrote an article for InTheseTimes.com. Okay, and the name of this article was The Myth of Black Misleadership. The Myth of Black Misleadership. And what she she goes through and lays out this history, like what happened to Detroit. And the same thing that happened in Detroit happened to other major cities, with the white flight, African American mayors taking over, things like this. But she said that when these African American mayors took over these cities, okay, and African American city council members, things like this, those cities were already on life support. See, the myth is, it was because the cities were in those conditions because of black mayors. In general, no. The cities were on life support when they became mayor. And there was a declining, eroding tax base. And the factories and the corporations are moving out of the inner city. Okay? And then drugs move in, crack cocaine, things like this, even before crack heroin. But drugs move in, and they tend to fill a vacuum of economic opportunity, so to speak. Read this article from blackpast.org, Redlining 1937. Redlining 1937, which deals with the history of redlining. The origin of the term redlining stems from the policies developed by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, HOLC, created in 1933 by the Franklin Roosevelt administration to reduce home foreclosures during the Great Depression, and then institutionalized by the 1937 U.S. Housing Act, which established the Federal Housing Association. Okay, so read this. This gives you some background history. I don't have time to get deep into it, so I'm going to try to keep this short. All this deals with policy. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. All this deals with laws and policies. All right, and it was public policy. Now, a lot of people listen to Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. I've listened to him. I've known him for years. I heard Dr. Claude Anderson say back about 94, 95, he was speaking at, I think, Fred Price's church. He said it was public policy that put us in this predicament. It's going to be public policy that takes us out of this predicament. Economic empowerment is part of it. It's not going to be economic empowerment that gets us out of this, because it wasn't economic empowerment that put us in this predicament. A lot of people, economic empowerment is important, but we're not in this predicament because of lack of economic empowerment. We're in this predicament because of public policy. The solution to bad public policy is not economic empowerment. Solution to bad public policy is to fire the people that wrote the bad laws, run better candidates, and change the policies, change the laws. Because that's what put you in this predicament. I'm all for economic empowerment. I understand it better than most people. That's the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources was not because of lack of economic empowerment. Because even at the height of economic empowerment in this country, in about 1910, when African Americans owned almost 16 million acres of land, still probably about half of us were poor, living in poverty. It's the policies, it's the laws Economic empowerment is important, but this, once again, people are oftentimes people may prescribe the right prescription for the wrong illness. The solution to bad public policies is not economic empowerment. I repeat, the solution to bad public policies is not economic empowerment. The solution to bad public policies is to fire the people who wrote the bad public policies and keep writing them, run better candidates, and change the policies that are doing you harm. Economic empowerment is part of it, but no, that's a misunderstanding of history. That's like if people break in your front door and are shooting at you, you go to the back door and start shooting. Well, you shooting, but you ain't shooting in the right direction. So, and once again, policies and laws shape the environment that your business operates within. So it's both. When I teach, and Professor James Small and Dr. Leonard Jeffries teach, they deal with what's called the pyramid principle. The foundation of the pyramid principle is African history and culture. African history and culture gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. It gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. It helps to shape our culture. It gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. The two sides of the pyramid are economic empowerment and political empowerment. We have to have a synthesis of all three of those. It's not just one. Economic empowerment ain't a substitute for politics. Politics shapes your economic empowerment. And then when you deal with businesses, right? Business structures are legal structures shaped by government. LLC, limited liability company, S corporation, a partnership, sole proprietorship. That's all dealing with government. When you set up a business and you register your business with your state, and you choose your business name, you set up an LLC, you go to your state's website. That's government. Then you go to irs.gov and you get your EIN number, employer identification number. That's government for your business. Then once you get that, then you can go to the bank and set up a bank account in the business name, and they're regulated by the government. Federal Depository Insurance Corporation. That's government. Government regulates your business and shapes the economy that your business operates within. All right, let's continue. So we have to understand how all this connects. A lot of times people are just dealing with one aspect of it. No, we have to have a synthesis. Dr. Leonard Jeffries talks about how we have to have a synthesis of all of this. Professor James Small deals with how we have to have a synthesis of all three of these. African history and culture, which gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. And it also influences how we engage in economics, because see, we have a deep, rich history of cooperative economics, the co-ops. So when you read this book here, Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Emhart. Now, when I was at Wayne State's business school, because my degree is in business administration, I went to business school. We learned white business principles. We didn't learn this. See, African people, we have a deep, rich history in business, in the co-ops, the cooperative economics, which are principles we brought with us from Africa. But many of us went to white business schools, learned white business principles, and brought white business principles back to the African American community and tried to use them in the African American community. And they don't work in general for the community. They may work for your family, but in general for the community, it's entirely different. When you deal with things like the Color Merchants Association, created about 1928, coming out of the National Negro Business League, which was founded in 1900 by Booker T. Washington. And the Color Merchants Association is teaching black grocery store owners how to compete with the chain stores, the AMPs and the Kresge's, things like this. And it's teaching them better accounting principles. It's teaching them better marketing strategies. They're buying their product, their produce in bulk, so they get better economies of scale. Okay, this is the Colored Merchants Association. When you study things like the Colored Farmers Union, created in Texas in 1886, and they grow to about 1.2 million members. You're talking about in 1886 to about 1901 or so. And they have to disband because of the attacks by white supremacists. Because when you study our involvement in cooperative economics, a lot of those co-ops, and Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhart deals with this, and I interviewed the sister back in about 2014, and there was an interview she did with Vice.com, I think it was. She talks about how one of the reasons why we don't hear a lot about the co-ops and our deep, rich history in cooperative economics is because a lot of those co-ops had to disband because they were being targeted by white supremacists. They were violent attacks, or they were people being killed. Okay, so what happens is when you break up the co-ops, you help to break up the cooperation. Because for the co-op to be successful, African Americans have to cooperate. But if you don't understand this history, then you just absorb white business principles and try to apply them to the African American community. In general, they don't work. You can learn marketing and accounting and things like this. When you study history like this, it's entirely different. This is an example of values, interests, and principles. This is our foundation. Our history engaging in economic empowerment is different than a lot of white people's history. But when African American children go to white business schools, or they may go to a business school at an HBCU, and they're still operating based upon white business principles. Not saying all HBCUs, business schools do this. I'll give you an example. When they bring back those white business principles to the African American community, okay, you're dealing with something different. Now, people mean well. A lot of them don't have this history. Luckily for me, when I was in business school, I was also studying African history. All right, so I had a different understanding of the information. But check out this book by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhart. You read this, this is something on a whole nother level. We were using the co-ops during slavery to raise money to buy people out of slavery. You're going to have co-ops like the Free African Society, founded in 1787. All right, most of this history people don't know. All right, let's continue. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. This is a different type of conversation. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. All right. Let me see something here. Let me see if we could pull up this article dealing with cooperative economics by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhart. Was that Vice or Vox? Which one was that? Let's see here. Okay, I'll pull it up. I need to interview that sister again. That sister's deep. All right. Okay, let's continue here. I'll try to find this article. All right, so back to this article from CBS.com. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. Now, Donald Trump, when he was interviewed by Bob Woodward, at first he didn't want it. He denied that systemic racism existed. Then he said if it does exist, it doesn't exist as much as other countries, things like this. He still downplayed the significance of systemic racism, just like he played down or downplayed the severity of the coronavirus. Okay, so I guess he wants to keep it on the down low. Is he like a big fan of R. Kelly or something? I don't know what that's about. How black co-ops can fight institutional racism. This is an interview with Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard. How black co-ops can fight institutional racism. We talked with Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard, an expert on cooperative economics, about the ways that blacks can join together through a capitalistic enterprise and create social change. We'll post I think this is the right, this is the right article. We'll post this link here. Check this out. This is from Vice.com. This is the one I was thinking about. Just briefly here in this article, Vice.com asked a question in the interview. Everyone kind of understands what co-ops are, but can you give me a hard definition? She said businesses that practice cooperative economics are owned by a collective of the people. One of the best examples are credit unions. That's one of the best examples that exist today. You have food co-ops, and I'm a member of Black Securities Food Network here in Detroit. Brother Malik Kinney and his group. But credit unions, the members are owners. The people who have accounts with credit unions, they're members. They're owners of the credit union also. Businesses that practice cooperative economics are owned by a collective of people. The important part is that the people are not owning it for the purpose of making a profit, but for the purpose of satisfying a need or addressing a problem. Satisfying a need or addressing a problem. Another unique piece is the democratic governing structure. Everybody who owns it has one vote regardless of how much money they put into it. If you choose to put more money into that enterprise, that's your choice, and you can get a return. But your ability to make the decisions for the enterprise are equal to anyone else's. It's a way to democratize and make more grassroots ownership possible. All right. Now, let me see. Okay, so she talks about satisfying a need as opposed to making money. She was asked the question: how do co-ops function in a capitalistic system? How do co-ops function in a capitalistic system? All right. She said, we have examples all over the world, and sometimes how that looks is it's a small enterprise that allows smaller individuals to compete. She said, take a group like Land of Lakes, which is one of the largest agricultural corporations. So Land of Lakes, like Land of Lakes butter. Okay, it is actually a cooperative of dairy farmers that all own Land of Lakes together equally. It is actually a cooperative of dairy farmers that all own Land of Lakes together equally. And Land of Lakes buys its milk and produces all the dairy products. So the co-op has the factories, does all the production, does all the marketing, handles the business side. That frees the farmers up to do their dairy farming, knowing that they have a market. Individually, they would not be able to afford a production plant or afford all the advertising. Let me repeat this. Individually, these farmers, these are white farmers. Individually, they would not be able to afford a production plant or afford all the advertising. But owning it all together, the individual farmers can now afford to compete. So we have a history of cooperative economics. Cooperative economics is not black capitalism. That's something different. But a lot of people don't know that this history exists. Okay? So she was asked the question, what role has cooperative economics played in black communities in the U.S.? What role has cooperative economics played in black communities in the U.S.? So she said, African Americans have engaged in some form of collective economics throughout our entire history in America. Okay, now she's probably talking about slavery because we've been here at least 51,700 years. And this was our land stolen from us. So when you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by my friend Dr. David Imhotep, and this new book should be out any week now. I have to email me a few days ago. I had to get back in touch with him. This book documents the African presence in South America, Central America, and North America, going back at least 56,000 years ago in South America, but at least 51,700 years ago in the land that we call the United States of America, specifically in South Carolina, the Khoisan, who come from Southern Africa and who are the ancestors of the Anu and the Twa, the short-statured Africans. Okay, they go all around the world, but they were here. We African people were here in this land before Native Americans, the people who we call Native Americans, even came into existence. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. But even though we were here going back at least 51,700 years ago, and you have Asians who come to this land around 3000 BC, the Asians and the Africans intermix, and their offspring are who we call Native Americans. And when you look at old black and white photographs of Native Americans, these are usually a darker skinned people. Okay, even though all that took place, that does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. The transatlantic slave trade happens also. You have to understand the chronology of like the last 50,000 years of history. Okay, so to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. So going back to this article from Vice.com, then we'll go back to the one from CBS News. African Americans have engaged in some form of collective economics throughout our entire history in America. Sometimes it was tilling kitchen gardens on Sundays when we weren't working as enslaved people and sharing the produce. Sometimes it was putting in dues to bury loved ones. Okay, because you're going to have these benevolent societies that are going to raise money to bury loved ones and things like this. You're going to have some societies that raise money to buy people out of slavery. By the 1700s and 1800s, we had more formalized systems of collective economics that were more enterprise driven, like insurance companies and collective farming, because African people were coming from communal societies. We're coming from society. So if you read books by Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango wrote, I have it here somewhere in one of these stacks, African People and European Holidays of Mental Genocide. African People and European Holidays of Mental Genocide. And when we look at the principle, when we look at the Nguzu Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, and we look at Ujima, collective work and responsibility, okay, is talking about African people working together in our societies, collective work and responsibility. So Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango talked about how traditionally African people spent like 1/3 of the year in celebration. He said because we worked together and got the work done, so we had time for celebration. So that ties into Ujima, okay, collective work and responsibility. Then the 4th principle, Ujamaa, cooperative economics. All right, these are all African principles that are part of Kwanzaa to reconnect us to African history, African principles, reconnect us to those values, interests, and principles that give us our foundation.
Revitalizing, restorative, indulgent, essential. Crea's Love Butter Raw Shea Butter Collection. How do we know if our skin products are truly delivering all of the health benefits they should? Crea's Love Butter is a thoughtful combination of hand-selected ingredients designed to enhance the level of your skin's health. Crea's Love Butter is an ideal gift for health-conscious loved ones and is a pleasure to both give and receive. They've harnessed the restorative powers of raw shea butter and infused it with their love and passion for revitalizing skin that you will undoubtedly feel from the first use. Visit their website today, creaslovebutter.com. CREAS, createslovebutter.com. Put your skin in the game. Yaya Rule is a line of African print-inspired apparel catered to the black community. The pieces include t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, jackets, dresses, skirts, activewear, bags, and other accessories and home decor. This brand offers a revived way for men and women to wear their black pride and honor their African heritage anywhere at any time. This apparel line is for anyone, whether you are working in the corporate world, are an entrepreneur, or an artist. Their selection will allow you to casually let your pride shine or dress it up as wanted. It is for those who have already embraced African fabrics and for those who are just getting introduced to them. Reclaim and experience a part of our culture with rich and colorful African prints. The clothing line and the accessories are available right now starting at $17.99. For more information on the new items and accessories, visit yayarule.com.
So by the 1700s and 1800s, we had more formalized systems of collective economics that were more enterprise driven, like insurance companies and collective farming. Eventually, we had collective grocery stores, credit unions, and health care. Grocery stores. Now, I live in Detroit. Now, I don't know about anybody else around the country, right? All the black people I know eat every day, or at least try to eat every day, want to eat every day. I don't know what y'all do around the country, okay? If we can't figure out how to have collective grocery stores, when that is part of our history, then I don't know what the hell a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. We have a deep, rich history of this. We have a deep, rich history of the collective grocery stores. We have to tap into that history. That's that foundation, the African history and culture. It's not. We don't do all this research to be like walking encyclopedias. No. Your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. So we have to tap into this to understand how do we deal with these problems in the past and be able to take things farther than our ancestors were able to take them. By the 1700s and 1800s, we had more formalized systems of collective economics that were more enterprise driven, like insurance companies and collective farming. Eventually, we had collective grocery stores, credit unions, and health care. Europeans eventually recognized the model around 1844, and it formally came to the U.S. Blacks then started forming official co-ops in the 1860s and 1870s. By the 1880s, labor unions were actually helping workers to start their own co-ops, and African Americans were involved in that too. So she was asked the question, did co-ops play a role in the civil rights movement? She said it was what I call a silent partner to the movement. It was what I call a silent partner to the movement. This was done by African Americans partly to survive outside of U.S. capitalism, which was so exploitive. It was also a way to create independence and wealth so we could be more politically active. So she was asked, can you tell me about the relationship between segregation and cooperative economics, the relationship between segregation and cooperative economics? Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard said, one of the things we learn when we study cooperative economics is the stronger co-ops have members who have a strong sense of camaraderie. Okay, camaraderie. She says, so how do you find people who already have that feeling and get them to do co-ops? For African Americans, sometimes it was already being involved in church or an activity that made you want to do more for your community. Sometimes it was because they had nothing and they pulled together just to survive. And sometimes they were already politically active. And then they realized being politically active made them economically vulnerable. Sometimes they realized being politically active made them economically vulnerable. Dr. W.B. Du Bois said that we need to self-segregate so that we can create that sense of solidarity and use an economic structure that recognizes that sense of solidarity to create economic prosperity for all of us. And from that position of strength, we can go back out to the rest of the world, either integrate if we want to, or at least demand our rights and demand equal footing. Okay? So she's talking about Dr. W.B. Du Bois. Read the rest of this article. This is from Vice.com. This is an interview with Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard, who wrote the book Collective Courage. Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. So this is an article from Vice.com, How Black Co-ops Can Fight Institutional Racism. This is from August 9th, 2016, by Sage Howard. How Black Co-ops Can Fight Institutional Racism. All right, let's see here. Let's post this link here. Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know you can advertise with us. Current promotion, buy 1 month, get 2 months free. We have, I think, maybe 2 more slots available because we just brought on some new advertisers today. An African American business owners, post the name of your business here in the thread of the broadcast as well. Okay, so let's continue. So let's go back to the article from CBSNews.com. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. So we talked about African American workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. We talked about the housing market lost $218 billion in sales because black applicants could not get home loans. Also, about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African American entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. Read the article from History.com. History.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. Read this article from June 21st, 2019. How the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million black World War II veterans. How the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million black World War II veterans. All right? This is part of the New Deal. All this deals with history. Okay, this is why it's extremely important to understand this. When it talks about the GI Bill's effect on black veterans, just to give you some background information on this, this is page 2 of this article. From the start, black veterans had trouble securing the GI Bill's benefits. Some could not access benefits because they had not been given an honorable discharge from the military, and a much larger number of African American veterans were discharged dishonorably than their white counterparts. Veterans who did qualify could not find facilities that delivered on the GI Bill's promise. African American veterans in a vocational training program at a segregated high school in Indianapolis were unable to participate in activities related to plumbing, electricity, and printing because adequate equipment was only available to white students. Simple intimidation kept others from enjoying the GI Bill benefits. In 1947, for example, a crowd hurled rocks or threw rocks at African American veterans as they moved into a Chicago housing development. Thousands of African American veterans were attacked in the years following World War II, and some were singled out and lynched. Okay, so read the rest of this. It talks about redlining, a white post-war housing boom, and redlining in black neighborhoods. The GI Bill and the racial wealth gap. The GI Bill and the racial wealth gap. The original GI Bill ended in July 1956. By that time, nearly 8 million World War II veterans had received education or training, and 4.3 million home loans worth $33 billion had been handed out. But African American veterans had been left behind, as employment, college attendance, and wealth surged for whites. Disparities with their African American counterparts not only continued but widened. Disparities with their African American counterparts not only continued but widened. There was, writes a writer named Katz Nelson, quote, no greater instrument for widening an already huge racial gap in post-war America than the GI Bill, end quote. Today, a stark wealth gap between African American and white Americans persists. The median wealth for white Americans is about $171,000. For African American households, the median household wealth is just $17,100, about 1/10. The legacy of the GI Bill is still at work, and for African American families, its negative impact could linger for years to come. This was public policy. This was public policy that increased the racial wealth gap. Okay? It's going to be public policy that closes it. I'm all for economic empowerment. But that ain't what caused this. This was government. This was laws. This was policies. I'm all for economic empowerment and us doing business with one another and the 5-story building. I'm all for all that. That ain't what caused this. So we have to be very clear on this. All right. So read that article, and then you can also read FDR signs GI Bill. FDR signs GI Bill as well. From history.com. That was June 22nd, 1944. That's when it was signed. All right, so let's go back to the article from CBS.com. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. And all this deals with policies and laws and things like this as well. So the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if these gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. The U.S. economy could have $5 trillion added to the GDP, gross domestic product. The GDP is about $19.5 trillion as it is now. Right at about $19.5 trillion. Okay. So, yeah, U.S. GDP totaled $19.5 trillion last year in 2019. Now we know it dropped 32.9% in the second quarter of this year because of this dumbass in the White House who has no clue what he's doing. Okay, Donald Trump. This is an example of how elections have consequences. Quote, racial inequality has always had an outsized cost, one that was thought to be paid only by underrepresented groups, the Citigroup banking chair Raymond McGuire said in a statement. He went on to say, quote, What this report underscores is that this tariff is levied on all of us, end quote. What this report underscores is that this tariff is levied on all of us. So this deals with how everybody pays the cost of racism because of the loss in the economic impact on the economy. $16 trillion lost. Federal Reserve data show that white households' net worth grew 43% to $61,200. They must be talking about average net worth because that's not the median net worth. Median is a statistical measure where 50% of the population is below a certain point and 50% of the population is above a certain point. That's the median. This looks like the average. Federal Reserve data showed that white households' net worth grew 43% to $61,200 between 1995 and 2016. Between 1995 and 2016. While it remained flat at $35,400 for African American families. Moody's Investor Service found that 44% of African American households owned their homes in 2019. 44%. Compared with 74% of white households. There's a 30% gap dealing with home ownership. Okay? So this is why home ownership is so important. So this is why you hear a lot of talk right now. This is not an endorsement, but if you watch my Sunday night show, we've been going through breaking down Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America. It's in 6 parts. So we've been past 5 weeks. We've been going through breaking it down. It's a 22-page agenda for the African American community. We've been going through page by page, policy by policy, breaking it down. One of the things that they're focusing on is increasing the rate of home ownership for African Americans. Okay, and right now with this coronavirus pandemic, African Americans are more vulnerable to being evicted when it comes to renting because a lower percentage of African American households are owners. Okay, and if you own your home, if you have some positive equity in your home, you can possibly tap into that positive equity, get a line of credit or something like that, use that as resources, okay, to weather the storm. But also, if you are a home owner, it's going to, in general, it's going to take longer for you to be thrown out of your house if you own it than if you just rent it in general. Okay. So this has wide-ranging ramifications. So the study also highlights the, quote, real costs of long-standing discrimination against minority groups, especially against African Americans, and particularly in the U.S., Citigroup economist Catherine Mann said in a statement. A McKinsey study released in 2019 explored how these and other inequities have reduced the nation's wealth. The McKinsey study from 2019 explored how these and other inequities have reduced the nation's wealth. So when Donald Trump talks about make America great again, notice he doesn't talk about these inequities. Usually he doesn't talk about the gap in home ownership rates for African Americans, unless when he's lying about it, saying oh, is an increase in home ownership. He doesn't talk about the fact that African American women make 61 or 62% for every dollar that the average white male makes. It'll take the average African American woman loses almost $1 million in lost earnings over her working career. If we look at the article from blackenterprise.com, Black Enterprise has an article dealing with this. And the average African American woman loses, it'll take from, when they look at from age, the average African American woman would have, it takes her 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes in 12 months. This is what Black Women's Equal Pay Day is all about. Okay, so I find it interesting that Trump doesn't want to address these inequities. You listen to him, he doesn't want to address these inequities. He doesn't want to address why is the African American unemployment rate usually double that of the white unemployment rate. Okay, so a McKinsey study released in 2019 explored how these and other inequities have reduced the nation's wealth. The nation's GDP, which is the total value of goods and services, could be up to 6% higher by 2028. Could be up to 6% higher by 2028 if the racial wealth gap is closed. The consulting firm concluded. Lawmakers must pass targeted policies. Now, this is what the article says. And this is citing the study. Lawmakers must pass targeted policies that boost household income for Black Americans in order to address the issue, McKinsey said. Okay? Lawmakers, because all this is dealing with policies and laws. I'm all for economic empowerment, but that ain't that. If policies address these issues, then that will automatically help economic empowerment. But these conditions don't exist because of lack of economic empowerment. They exist because of bad public policies. Okay, so we have to understand the connection, because you'll prescribe, because if you don't understand this, you'll prescribe a remedy that doesn't address the root cause of the problem. Lawmakers must pass targeted policies that boost household income for African Americans in order to address the issue, McKinsey said. Quote, the country has over $1 trillion to gain from the effort, end quote. Now, incarceration rates among African Americans, voter suppression efforts, and conscious bias in hiring all play a role in hindering the U.S. from making strides in closing this gap. So it's showing the impact that racism, implicit bias, and things like this is having on America, how it is harming America. Some people will go along with racism because they think it just benefits them. It's showing how this is harming everybody in lost revenue for the economy. Separately, the financial giant Citigroup on Wednesday said it would direct $1 billion toward helping closing the racial wealth gap, including investing $550 million over the next 3 years in encouraging home ownership for people of color. All right. I hope most of it's going to African Americans. All right. Another $50 million will go toward capital investments for African American entrepreneurs. Another $50 million, will go toward capital investments for African American entrepreneurs. All right, now if we look quickly here at the article from NPR.org, National Public Radio, cost of racism, U.S. economy lost $16 trillion because of discrimination, bank says, September 23rd, 2020. They lay out some of the things they lay out. They lay out 4 key racial gaps between African Americans and white Americans. $13 trillion lost in potential business revenue because of discriminatory lending to African American entrepreneurs, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. An estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. Now, at the beginning, I talked about how racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Okay? What this shows is how if you are fair and if you level the playing field, how this will benefit the economy overall. an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. Next, 2.7 trillion in income lost because of disparities in wages suffered by African Americans. $2.7 trillion in income lost because of disparities in wages by African Americans. Because if we have more disposable income, we're going to spend it. We'll spend it with African American owned businesses. Most of it, with 97% of our dollars, we spend with people that don't look like us. But it will also help the overall economy. That helps the stock market. It helps the balance sheets, the profit margins of corporations, etc. All right. If we look at the article from blackenterprise.com, black women lose out over $1 million in their careers to the wage gap. Black women lose out over $1 million in their careers to the wage gap. And this is from 2019, October 17, 2019. And they talk about how at this time African American women make 61 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes. But they also deal with how even at the PhD level, how African American women only make 60 cents for every dollar that their white male counterparts make. Okay, and they're dealing with this huge, how the average African American woman loses almost $1 million in her working working career from age. They look at from like about age in her 40-year career. Okay, they're looking from age 20 to about age 60. A black woman will lose out on $946,120 over a 40-year career if she continues to make 61 cents on the dollar that every white man makes due to the wage gap analysis by the National Women's Law Center shows. And we see African American men make about 79 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes. If we go back to the article from NPR.org, $218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit. $218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit. And then 90 billion to 113 billion in lifetime income lost from discrimination in accessing higher education. We talked about that in the article from CBS.com. Okay, lost income from discrimination in accessing higher education. So what this shows is how racism is hurting everybody, and it's going to be policies, laws and policies that address this. Okay, I'm all for economic empowerment, but that ain't what caused this.
Gain knowledge in minutes with Blacklist Ed. Blacklist Ed is an app that provides insightful summaries of books pertaining to the Black experience. As Black people, we know the importance of reading books to discover our incredible contributions to world history, to uplift our self-esteem, and to empower ourselves for our relentless fight for social justice. Unfortunately, with our busy lives, it feels like there is never enough time to read a book. Fortunately, there's a solution. With Blacklist Ed, their app provides key insights from best-selling books about the Black experience, therefore saving you time, increasing your knowledge, and empowering yourself through inspirational and actionable ideas. You can read or listen on the go. Start your free trial today by going to blacklisted.com. That's black without the C, BLAK. Or you can download the Blacklist Ed app from the App Store or Google Play. Blacklist Ed, empower yourself. September is Life Insurance Awareness Month, and Yolanda Spivey at Michael Whitney and Associates wants you to know that this is the best time right now to shop for life insurance. There are many plans available that fit everyone's budget and lifestyle. Right now, due to COVID-19, some companies are not requiring any medical exams to qualify. Leave your loved ones a will and not a bill. Contact Yolanda Spivey today at 1-833-289-2525. That's 1-833-BUY-BLACK, BLAK. Also visit mwhitney.com. That's mwhitney.com. You can email her at life@mwhitney.com, and also visit her website, theblackinsurancenetwork.com, theblackinsurancenetwork.com. Leave your loved ones a will and not a bill.
Look at the, let's see, I think it was one of the, oh yeah, this right here. One of the policies that needs to be looked at and incorporated, and you know, on my Sunday night show, we'll go through Biden's plan. He has a lot of good things in his plan. I've read it 3 times. It addresses redlining, addresses increasing the percentage of African American homeowners. There's a lot of good things. It deals with environmental justice, criminal justice reform. There's a lot of good things in it. And it's much better than Donald Trump's anti-black agenda also. So you can compare the two if you like. One of the policies that needs to be revisited and actually implemented is the results of the Kerner Commission report from 1968. The National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, which was commissioned, it was announced July 28, 1967 by President Lyndon Johnson. And this was designed to address the rebellions that were taking place across the country. And it was it was headed up by Governor Otto Kerner, who's the governor of Illinois. And they surveyed 23 cities, and they wanted to ask 3 questions when it came to the rebellions, okay? Because this was right after the Detroit Rebellion ended in '67. They wanted to look at 3 questions: what happened when they talk about the rebellions? What happened? Why did it happen? And what can be done to prevent racial disturbances in the future? Okay, if you read this article from blackpast.org, okay, it deals with it's called National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, 1967 Kerner Commission, National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. But very quickly here, they want to look at what can be done to prevent racial disturbances in the future. In order to answer these questions, the Commission surveyed 23 cities across the nation which experienced a racial rebellion. They found that, because like in '67, 67 was known as the Long Hot Summer. You had 159 violent uprisings in 1967 alone. Okay, now they were not all on the level of a Detroit or Newark, New Jersey, but they happened. In USA Today, USAtoday.com has an article called "The Long Hot Summer." It's dealing with the rebellion in Newark, New Jersey. They go through and break this down. So they looked at 23 cities that had rebellions, okay, to analyze what happened and why did it happen, and what could happen to keep these disturbances, keep these rebellions from taking place. So they found that the racial disturbances were not the result of a single triggering event. The racial disturbances were not the result of a single triggering event, but that in all cities surveyed, African Americans experienced severe economic and social disadvantages compared to whites. Severe economic and social disadvantages compared to whites. Also, the report noted that the riots or rebellions were not the result of any conspiracy. Rather, they were a response to what the report identified as the racial attitudes and behaviors of white Americans toward African Americans. The racial attitudes and behaviors of white Americans toward African Americans. This report came out in 1968. In responding to why the rebellions occurred, the Kerner Commission report pointed to African Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness regarding extremely high rates of unemployment and underemployment. Unemployment and underemployment. Poverty, police brutality, and inadequate public services. The report continued that a largely poor black population was confined to the central cities while a predominantly white population moved out, and that the racism of white Americans was, quote, essentially responsible for the explosive mixture, end quote, leading to the uprisings. The racism of white Americans was, quote, essentially responsible for the explosive mixture, end quote, leading to the uprisings. Now, answering the question, what can be done to prevent this in the future? The Kerner Commission report suggested that the federal government intervene to improve housing, improve education, improve employment opportunities, and social services for African Americans. Also, to dismantle discriminatory practices in education. Dismantle discriminatory practices in education, employment, the police force, and criminal court systems. Now, when we look at the report from Citigroup, the report from Citigroup is talking about over the last 20 years, $16 trillion lost to the U.S. economy because of inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investments in the African American community. Okay, so when we look at the Kerner Commission report from '68, and they're showing what's causing the rebellions, is not just impacting African Americans, is a loss overall. All of America hurt. All of America is impacted by racism. As long as racism is depicted as just hurting those black people over there that we don't want to come over here, we don't get the full perspective of how it's actually negatively impacting America. So President Johnson accepted the report, Lyndon Johnson, but did not support the conclusions, and minimal efforts were made to address the problem identified by the commission. Now, also, he's dealing with the Vietnam War at this time as well. And the Vietnam War is taking attention, a lot of attention away from the civil rights movement. 1967, March of 1967, Dr. King was interviewed for 26 minutes by NBC News, and it's on NBC News' YouTube channel. It's an excellent interview. It's called something like Beyond Civil Rights, Black Power, because Black Power was the next logical step in the civil rights movement. And the Black Power movement basically comes out of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, in 1966. And if you watch the interview that I did with Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who's a nephew of Dr. Leonard Jeffries, he's an associate professor of history at Ohio State University. And he was also on the advisory board that put together this study here that everybody should download and use. Everybody should download this, use this with your children, use this with your children's teachers, schools, etc. Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. This study documents how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in our schools, and it gives all different types of recommendations to better correctly teach the history of slavery. Now, Donald Trump needs to read this, okay? Because we saw, if you saw my Sunday night show, we talked about how Donald Trump is attacking the New York Times 1619 project, even though the 1619 project is flawed, and I talked about that. Go watch my Sunday night show from September 20th, 2020. 1619 project is flawed, but it should not be attacked by a sitting president. If you read the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, our youth will be taught to love America. Trump vows to restore patriotic education in schools to counter the narrative that nation is wicked and racist. Okay, he doesn't want to deal with the history of slavery. He doesn't want to talk about slavery, anything like that. And he wants to attack the 1619 project. He threatened to, in California, he threatened to defund the school districts in California that are using the 1619 project to teach students, because there's a curriculum around the 1619 project also. Okay, so check that out and listen to the Sunday night show as well. If you read so when the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report happened in 2018, people were revisiting it. Read this article from WashingtonPost.com, No Progress for African Americans on Home Ownership, Unemployment, and Incarceration in 50 Years. No progress for African Americans on home ownership, unemployment, and incarceration in 50 years. This is from February 26, 2018. And it's looking at, now you have to understand what happened in the past 50 years, because things go up, things go down, etc. But it's comparing the results of the Kerner Commission report in 68 to what's taking place in 2018 also. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right, just a minute here. Let's see what else we have. Okay, and then when we tie in education and higher education, etc., then we tie into crushing student loan debt for African Americans as well. If we read their article from CBSNews.com, November 15th, 2019, student loan debt weighs heavier on black borrowers. Fed says Federal Reserve student loan debt weighs heavier on black borrowers. So when you have presidential candidates and those in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives talking about student loan forgiveness, that's huge for African Americans. That will help to relieve a lot of debt from African Americans, African American families, increase our credit ratings. Okay, so we could buy a home at a lower interest rate, buy a car at a lower interest rate, buy property at a lower interest rate. Okay, so read that article on. Time to get deep into that. I've talked about that before. But that gives, when you relieve student loan debt, that's more money that we can use to buy a home, start a business, invest in stocks, buy land, etc. Okay? That has a huge impact on our families and our communities. All right, so we're going to wrap it up with that. That's enough. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and also my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Follow me on Instagram, Michael Imhotep on Instagram, and The AHN Show, The AHN Show on Twitter. Okay? African American business owners, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network, a current promotion. Buy 1 month, get 2 months free. We have a couple more slots left for that. Okay. And you've seen some of the interviews I've done dealing with the film Hapi, the role of economic development in African civilization. Speaking of Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, these are two of my teachers. They're in this film. Are you ready for the new black economy? Well, Happy is a brand new documentary that will set you on a path of knowledge and enlightenment. The Happy film gives viewers a snapshot of our economic history from the dawn of civilization right up until today. Happy brings together the brightest and most prolific minds in the fields of psychology, history, business, and politics. Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Julian Malveaux. Together they deliver a message of cooperative economics, financial independence, and a pride that we can all be inspired by. It's on sale now is streaming on all digital formats, or for DVD, please visit the website happyfilm.com, H-A-P-I, happyfilm.com. Use offer code HAPPY, AHN for 10% off, H-A-P-I, AHN for 10% off. And they have online screenings of it also periodically. So when you go to the website, it lets you know when the latest screening is. I actually moderated a panel discussion with some of the cast members. It was a private online panel discussion for people who purchased tickets for an online screening of it. Okay, so that was a really, really good panel discussion. We dealt with a lot of history, dealt with ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. I mean, we dealt with a lot. Hopefully they'll make it available. It's from the director Takeed Grant, Brother Takeed Grant. All right, so look, we're going to get out of here. Also, you can donate to the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Also, just keep doing the research, stay on the air, finance our Sunday night show. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Also, listen to our audio podcasts as well. We're on 8 different podcast platforms: Castbox, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio. So search for the African History Network Show wherever you get your podcast from. Then also go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and click on listen to podcasts as well. Okay. All right, so we're going to get out of here. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.
The revolution will not be televised. It will be digitized, coded, and branded. Don't let your young person get left behind. Join Tech Core 2 on Saturday, September 26, 2020 in their 6th straight year, providing tech, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, coding, and Saturday classes. Tech Core 2's mission is to develop a technology pipeline program for urban youth from kindergarten to college to career entry. Tech Core 2 offers 9 different tech classes for students in grades kindergarten through high school, including computer programming, coding, gaming, hip-hop and STEM, and video production. All classes are online with live instruction. To register or for more information, please visit techcore2.org. That's techcore2.org, or give them a call at 215-879-6701. That's 215-879-6701. Don't forget to grab your $10 discount with promo code TAHN Fall 2020. The books Ivy and Catalina Visit Sellville and Brooklyn Softball Adventures are from authors Sidney Carujo, Brooklyn Carujo, and Shanine Dials Carujo. In Ivy and Catalina Visit Sellville, readers will join Ivy and Catalina as they tour the small town of Sellville with their grandparents to learn about the world of science. The girls will learn about the structures and functions of the cell. This book provides great analogies that make learning about the cell easy for kids. The book Brooklyn Softball Adventures takes readers on the journey with Brooklyn through her first 2 seasons of playing softball. Through facing adversity, Brooklyn and her teammates build their confidence and learn to love the game. The book encourages children to try new things and never accept defeat. Ivy and Catalina Visit Sellville is by Sidney Carujo and Shanine Dials Carujo. And Brooklyn's Softball Adventures is by Brooklyn Carujo and Shanine Dials Carujo. Both books are available right now at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, BooksAMillion.com, and Target.com. Are you ready for a new black economy? Well, Happy, the Role of Economics in the Development of Civilization is a brand new documentary that will set you on a new path of knowledge and enlightenment. The Happy film gives viewers a snapshot of our economic history from the dawn of civilization right up until today. The underlying theme of the film is the interrelationship between the 3 essential components of economics, politics, and culture. Happy brings together the brightest and most prolific minds in the fields of psychology, history, business, and politics, such as Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Dr. Julian Malveaux, Dr. Zahi Hawass, and Jabari Osazi, and more. Together, they deliver a message of cooperative economics, financial independence, and a pride that we can all be inspired by. The film is on sale now. It's streaming on all digital formats. Or for DVD, please visit Happy, H-A-P-I, happyfilm.com. Use offer code HAPPY, AHN for a 10%